story of the night of Jesus' arrest starts here. Where we are right now, this is the roof of the upper room. This is where Jesus and his disciples gathered for the Lord's Supper, for the Last Supper, as maybe some of you would call it. And a lot of really cool things happen here, a lot of events that are really important in our history, our understanding of Jesus and our calling, our relationship to him. You've got the washing of the feet takes place here. You know, when Jesus comes in and really demonstrates what servant leadership is to us, where as their leader, he's going to take care of them in the most really humble of ways. And, you know, it kind of goes on from there. Judas leaves to betray him. And, you know, Jesus tells Peter, you're going to betray me. And Peter says, no way, I would never do that. And you have all these conversations. And then they finally settle in, and Jesus just starts to really expound and to explain and try to give them comfort before it's about to happen. You know, really displaying his character, because he's the one who's about to be crucified, but he's just pouring out care for them. And, you know, it's all recorded in detail in John chapters 13 through 17, but part of it that really jumps off the page at me is in the back end of it all. And Jesus is praying in chapter 17, and he says this thing, and what really emerges over the course of the whole conversation is the relationship between Jesus and the Father, and then between the Father and Jesus and us. And what Jesus says there is, he's like, God, I want them to know that you and I are one, and that when they see me, they see you. You know, I think sometimes we view Jesus as, you know, sort of the kind, nice one, but God the Father is being a little more stern toward us. That's not true at all. Their character is the same. They love us the same. And as a matter of fact, that whole sentence, that whole part of Jesus' prayer for us concludes by him saying, I want them to know that you love them as you love me. And that's staggering to think. Like, I can't even wrap my head around that. How does God the Father love me in the same way that he loves Jesus, his son? That's what it says. That's what Jesus says. And that love is about to be acted out, you know, over the course of the rest of this weekend, over the course of the crucifixion and the resurrection and all these things. But it really kicks off here in this big final meal here in the upper room. And then it leaves here and it moves over to the Mount of Olives, to the Garden of Gethsemane, because the last verse, it says they left here, they crossed the Kidron, and they went to the Garden of Gethsemane. So now we're going to go there. So as the story of the night of Jesus' arrest continues, he leaves the upper room and he comes across the Kidron Valley, which is right behind me, and he comes over here to the Mount of Olives, to a place called Gethsemane. Now, the traditional site for Gethsemane is just over to my right, a little bit down the hill. But the original garden would have been much, much larger than the current garden, and probably would have contained even the area where we are now, just outside. And so you can kind of see around me, you can see some olive trees, and you can see the city right behind. And it's a good idea of what it would have looked like back then. You know, back then it probably would have been a few less non-fruiting trees and more olive trees, because they were more concerned with agriculture. But it's a pretty good look at the setting. And here in this place, and, you know, in this area, is where Jesus went to pray that last night. And he knew he was going to be crucified, he was going to be beaten, and he was just torn up. You know, he's bearing so much of a load. It's the only time in history where Jesus asks for prayer. You know, like every day billions of people pray to him, but on that day he asked Peter and James and John, will you guys come with me? Will you pray with me? You know, to get through this night. And the Bible says that he sweated, you know, and drops of blood came, and he was pleading with God, please take this away from me if you can. And, you know, he goes out and finds the guy sleeping, and he comes back and prays, and finally he says, not my will but yours be done, Father. And this, you know, Gethsemane means place of crushing, because this is the place where God the Father sort of crushed Jesus's will, and Jesus accepted and submitted and said, okay, I'll do what I'm supposed to do, and agreed to go to the cross. And this is really the place where the decision was made that benefited us and saved our lives. And then, you know, as you know, Judas brings the temple guards and Jesus is arrested. And when that happens, and they transition from here to the Sanhedrin. As the story of the night of Jesus' arrest unfolds, he leaves the Mount of Olives, having been arrested, and he goes to the Sanhedrin. He goes to the court, quite possibly a place called St. Peter and Gallicantu in Jerusalem today. And he goes there, and he goes through the trial where he's falsely accused, and and beaten and all sorts of horrible things. He would then have been in prison, left for the night. He would have witnessed, because the Bible says when Peter denied the third time, that Peter made eye contact with him. And so he's totally abandoned. All of his disciples, except for John, have scattered off into the night. Peter has left him. He's alone. He's condemned falsely. And then he's put in prison overnight to await the beating and crucifixion the next day. And all of that takes place on that evening and in that place.
This video is brought to you by Jerusalem School Bethlehem Media Team.
Here at JSB, we provide a Christ-centered education to the community of Bethlehem. If you'd like to know about us more, please follow our social media or visit our website.
Stay tuned for our next episode of This is the Holy Land.